Today we're going to start with the chapter of atmosphere and environment. And the first section we have is air and oxygen, and the second one that we have is water and hydrogen. So air is a mixture of gases, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, noble gases, 1%, mainly argon, and carbon dioxide, 0.03%. So all of these gases absorb UV radiations, and through retaining heat, they're warming the Earth's surface. Now, if we want to find the percentage of oxygen in air, we're going to set up an experiment that depends on the property of oxygen, that it is an active gas. So in our gas cylinders or in our gas syringe, we have 100 centimeter cube of air that we pass to and fro the test tube. We first let in the 100 centimeter cube of air inside this test tube. That will push this syringe to the end, then we'll push it back, and so to and fro the air is passed over heated copper powder, which is placed in a tube between the syringe. And this hard glass tube is made up of silica to suit the experiment. Now, what happens is that when you're passing air over heated copper, and you know that oxygen is an active gas, that oxygen is going to react with copper to form copper 2 oxide, and that pink, reddish brown copper is going to turn black, which is important to remember. And so this copper turns black. And another thing that happens, because copper is reacting with oxygen and so it's turning black, that means that oxygen is being used up. So this 100 centimeter cube should decrease ideally to 79 centimeter cube. And so when you measure the gas left over in the syringe, it's going to be 79 centimeter cube and not 100 centimeter cube, which tells us that 21% of oxygen or of the air has been used, and that is oxygen because only oxygen is reacting with copper. And so the 79 centimeter cube that is left, that is mainly nitrogen and argon. Now when we want to distill air to separate all its components. So firstly, don't get confused when you're hearing the term distillation of gases, because yes, there cannot be distillation of gases. So we're going to liquefy air and then we're going to distill it to obtain liquid argon, liquid nitrogen, and liquid oxygen. So firstly, we will filter the air to remove any dust particles, and then we're going to remove carbon dioxide or water vapor, which is very essential, and we'll do that by bubbling the air to an alkali such as NaOH to get sodium carbonate and water. And water is removed in a drying tower with a drying agent, for example, silica gel. Then that air is compressed to 200 atmospheres pressure because we now want to convert it into liquefied air. And so when you compress it, the gas becomes hotter, and then that compressed gas, the compressed air is suddenly expanded, and so it becomes colder, and in that way it's compressed and expanded constantly till the temperature reaches negative 200 degrees Celsius. And at this temperature, all gases except neon and helium would be liquefied, and we don't need neon and helium, so we don't need to worry about that. Now, the color of this liquid, the air, will be pale blue due to the presence of oxygen in air in this solution. And then it's passed through the fractionating column or the fractionating tower in this case, where that liquefied air is slowly warmed, and at negative 196 degrees Celsius, nitrogen is given off. Then from negative 196 degrees Celsius, the temperature reaches negative 186 degrees Celsius. So argon boils up, and at negative 183 degrees Celsius, oxygen boils up, and they're all collected in separate containers. This is how we can separate all the components of air. Now, we've been discussing oxygen in quite detail, how to check its percentage in air, how to separate it into its components from air. So, well, why do we need oxygen? What is its importance? So respiration, as we all know, is essential for all organisms to survive. And respiration can only take place in the presence of oxygen. And so oxygen is essential for organisms to survive, or mainly animal life to survive, as well as plant life because they're respiring at night as well. And so the process by which these living organisms are producing energy from their food is respiration, and oxygen, as we discussed, is essential for this process. So what happens? Glucose C6H12O6 is combusting with oxygen or burning slowly in oxygen to form carbon dioxide, water, and energy. And the oxygen, when we are breathing in, that oxygen from the air is dissolving in our blood from the lungs, and then that oxygen goes and reacts with the glucose in our cells to produce energy through respiration that we just discussed. And then the carbon dioxide that is released is exhaled out. And so this was one example of combustion. And another example of combustion is for just heating fires. And so we know that for heating a fire or for combustion to take place, three things are essential: fuel, heat, and oxygen, which is why firefighters, when they want to extinguish a fire, they target on removing either fuel, heat, or oxygen to finish the fire. But remember, in electric fires, you cannot use water to extinguish it because what will happen is that it will just increase due to water being a conductor. So combustion takes place in the presence of oxygen. So again, oxygen is so very useful for us to create fires, for heating, etc. And then oxygen is also used in the formation of steel. Oxygen tents are there in hospitals for people who are finding difficulty in breathing. And oxygen, as we all know, is also used in welding. So let's move on to the common atmospheric pollutants. The ones in black are the pollutants. Blue tells you where the pollutants are forming or the sources of these pollutants, and red are the harmful effects of these pollutants because they're pollutants. So they're automatically harmful to the atmosphere or the environment. So you firstly have carbon dioxide, and how does it form? When incomplete combustion of carbon containing substances is taking place. So carbon dioxide forms, but along with that, carbon monoxide is also forming. And that carbon monoxide is such a poisonous gas and it's so harmful it can cause suffocation and death. And carbon monoxide is usually present at areas where there is harmful fire. For example, when litter or garbage is burning, carbon monoxide is being released. And methane is the next common atmospheric pollutant we have, is the next pollutant that we have, and that forms from bacterial decay of vegetable matter, and that can cause global warming. Nitrogen oxides, they're forming from lightning activity. Whenever lightning strikes, nitrogen oxide forms, and in internal combustion engines, nitrogen oxides are also released. So that can cause acid rain. And ozone, which is produced from photochemical reactions and forms photochemical smog. That smog has been formed with sunlight and ozone. Photo tells you that it's being formed in the presence of sunlight, and that chemical smog is actually ozone, and this photochemical smog can irritate your lungs. And then you have sulfur dioxide, which is produced from volcanoes and the combustion of fossil fuels, and once again, it can cause acid rain like nitrogen oxides. And unburnt hydrocarbons are also produced in internal combustion engines, and they can cause global warmings, and apart from that, unburnt hydrocarbons are a poisonous gases. So this air pollution that is being caused due to these atmospheric pollutants, how can we reduce the effects of it, or how can we prevent it? So we have three methods. Firstly, liming. Now in liming, you just apply calcium carbonate to soil because that soil is now acidic. So liming the soil is adding alkali to the soil or a base to the soil, and that's going to neutralize the effective acid. So that is preserving your soil. But then you have flue gas desulfurization, which is again taking place to reduce the effects of sulfur dioxide or flue gas that is released from combustion. So in flue gas desulfurization, what happens, sulfur dioxide or the flue gas is passed into the purification chamber from which from the top calcium carbonate is being dropped that combined with sulfur dioxide to form calcium sulfite, and calcium carbonate and water are removed this from the purification chamber, then carbon dioxide moves out and it's released from the chimney. So what are the equations, what are the reactions that are taking place? Calcium carbonate plus sulfur dioxide is forming calcium sulfate and carbon dioxide, and calcium sulfate and oxygen are forming calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfite and oxygen are forming calcium sulfate, because whenever you have 3, this is sulfite, and when you have 4, it's sulfate. So here it was calcium carbonate and sulfur dioxide forming calcium sulfite and carbon dioxide, and calcium sulfite isn't harmful. And we also have catalytic converters in our cars, etc., which are reducing the effective gases like carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, H4C2, and nitrogen oxides, which are all very harmful. So what happens? These gases are passed in the catalytic converter. There is a catalytic substrate there, and due to that, the 3 reactions are taking place. Carbon monoxide reacts with half a molecule of oxygen to form carbon dioxide. Hydrocarbons are reacting with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water, and carbon monoxide reacts with nitrogen oxides to form carbon dioxide and nitrogen. So redox reactions are taking place. There's reduction and oxidation both happening here. So what is the reduction? Nitrogen oxides or oxides of nitrogen are forming nitrogen and oxygen, and another type of nitrogen oxide to NO2 is forming nitrogen and oxygen again. These are just 2 different reactions which are pretty similar but pretty different as well. And so these are the reducing reactions, reduction, and examples of oxidation is when carbon monoxide is combining with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, and the other oxidation reaction that takes place is hydrocarbons combining with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water, as we discussed over here. So this is how we can remedy the effects of air pollution. And now let's have a look at acid rain. Acid rain takes place due to the dissolving of acidic oxides in the atmosphere. So what are these oxides? We first have sulfur dioxide, which is formed due to volcanic activity and burning of fossil fuels. Then we have nitrogen, which forms due to the extraction of metals, and carbon dioxide, which forms due to the formation of smoke. So we have SO2, we have NO2, and we have CO2, which are these harmful substances that are causing acid rain. And so they're harming plants, animals, and buildings. You can see how they're corroding buildings, especially those made of marble and limestone. For example, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. You can see how it's corroding over time due to acid rain. Next, we have the depletion of the ozone layer. So how is it depleting? By the reaction of ozone with chlorofluorocarbons. So let's have a look at that. Here you can see how these ozone molecules are forming by the interconversion of oxygen atoms and ozone atoms. And when they combine with chlorine, then those ozone molecules are destroyed, and that's causing depletion of the ozone layer. So what's happening? UV rays are striking the surface of the earth and they're striking chlorofluorocarbons as well, what happens? The carbon chlorine bond breaks between carbon and chlorine, and due to that breaking of the bond, that chlorine is released into the atmosphere and it binds with ozone to break the ozone molecule to destroy it and form holes in the ozone layer like this. So instead of using chlorofluorocarbons, we should be using hydrofluorocarbons because they're much less harmful, as chlorofluorocarbons are released when we use aerosol sprays, refrigerators, etc. Now let's have a look at the carbon cycle. So this is something we're very familiar with, and that is simply it's all about carbon, as the name suggests, and it's how carbon is being released and how it's being consumed. So um, it's being released in photosynthesis, and it's also being released by dead organisms and waste products when they form fossil fuels. It's also released in combustion, and factories are also emitting carbon dioxide. Animals are respiring to add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Plants are respiring to add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, but photosynthesis is taking up carbon dioxide, as well as ocean uptake, in which the ocean is just reacting with carbon dioxide because planktons and other organisms are either releasing it or absorbing it. And due to that, the ocean becomes acidic because it's dissolved with carbon dioxide. Now, next we have the next issue that we have is global warming, that we know is caused due to greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases, the main ones are carbon dioxide and methane, and we've discussed how they form. And so, what are the effects of global warming? You have extreme summers or extreme winters. The sea level is rising due to the melting of glaciers. You have wildfires because now those trees can catch fire easily. Those forests cannot catch fire due to an increase in temperature. The cycle of temperature and seasons is changing, and hence agriculture is impacted because you can't have agriculture planning, and your production is also affected. Health is affected because you have heat strokes, skin cancer, etc., due to increased heat, and that's why there is extinction of species as well, those who can't survive in such high temperatures. You have water loss, extreme water loss, but you also have in summers, but you also have rising of sea level in winters. So these extremes are very terrible and harmful. And houses are damaged because there's erosion, and apart from that, there's also rising acidity in oceans because there's an increased ocean uptake of carbon dioxide when the temperature increases. That's it for air and oxygen. Check out the next video for water. Stay tuned and do like and subscribe. Thank you.